Daily with Alex Marlow on SiriusXM Patriot 125.
They run concentration camps. They force the abortion of millions of babies. They brutally crack down on protesters. They hack America's networks. They have stolen millions of our jobs. China is the greatest threat to America's security and our values. Career politician Joe Biden is weak on China.
China is going to eat our lunch? Come on, man. They're not bad folks. But guess what? They're not a competition for us.
When Joe Biden was vice president, his son got a sweetheart $1.5 billion deal from the Bank of China. When Joe Biden was senator, he voted to give China special trade status that devastated American workers. Biden is weak on China and wrong for America. We need to stand up to China and protect American jobs and our national security. Senator Cotton is standing with President Trump to take on China and keep America great.
I'm Tom Cotton, and I approve this message.
Good stuff from Senator Tom Cotton, who's been a real leader on the China issue, and he's my guest now on our VIP hotline. Senator, it's great to have you back on Breitbart News Daily, and this is a very crucial point that it seems like no one else has made, which is that maybe the weakest person in Washington on China, who is responsible for, largely responsible for the spread of coronavirus, or this latest iteration of it, COVID-19, is Joe Biden. He's the weakest in the world on it. No one mentions this.
Alex, thanks for having me on. Joe Biden, as Robert Gates said, has been wrong on every major foreign policy question of the last 40 years. You could actually update that to say 50 years now, because he still doesn't believe that China is a competitor of ours. He still calls the Chinese Communist Party good folks. Just look what's happened in the last 2 months. They had a virus breaking out in the middle of their country. Rather than fess up, seek international help, try to contain it there, they lied, they hid, they suppressed information. Now they've unleashed a plague on the entire world while they are threatening to kill Americans by withholding essential pharmaceuticals from our nation. These are not good folks, and they are a competitor with us. Joe Biden still does not understand that, which is consistent with his 50-year record of voting to give away our jobs, or voting to outsource our factories there, or to turn a blind eye to all of the Chinese aggression that we see throughout the region. Joe Biden is weak on China, and we cannot afford to have Joe Biden as our president.
Yeah, it's a great point. It's really interesting that you've launched this ad, which we are fortunate enough to get a jump on Breitbart News. You guys can see it on the front page. And it's interesting because your race, Senator, you're up for re-election, but you're basically running unopposed. Is that sort of the situation? So you're kind of running ads elsewhere, not just Arkansas. You're running them in Ohio.
Well,
it's really interesting. I've never seen this
Alex.
before.
Let's not get carried away.
Okay.
I do have two opponents, an independent and a libertarian, but it is true that I do not have a Democratic opponent. That'll be the first time since 1876 the Democrats have not run a candidate for Senate in Arkansas. My team and I have worked diligently over the last 5 years to be prepared for this reelection, and the dividend of that was that we do not have a Democratic opponent. And, of course, that gives me some free time for what you might call extracurricular activities, like supporting our president in key states such as Ohio, or supporting great senators like Joni Ernst in Iowa or Cory Gardner in Colorado. And I certainly will be doing my all to make sure that we reelect the president and that we do not elect Joe Biden, who is, again, very, very weak on China, a defining issue for our times.
Okay, and I apologize, and thank you for the clarification. It's really important, but it's also this is interesting because I can't recall this, and it's very effective. I think it's a very meaningful ad, and I think that, again, this has been one of my frustrations here, Senator, which is that there are significant issues that coronavirus brings up, immigration, China, globalism, things that we talk about in conservative media a lot, we analyze a lot, and yet the narrative has been so overwhelmed by hysteria about the health issue, which is a significant issue. But I do think that we've lost some of the more meaningful angles to approach this crisis.
Yeah, so remember, what we see with the Wuhan coronavirus is not a bug. It is a feature of Communist Party rule. If the Chinese Communist Party had simply been open and transparent in early December, if they had acknowledged they had a problem, if they had asked for support from the World Health Organization and world-class scientists, not just from the United States, but from countries like South Korea and Japan and the countries of Europe, we might have been able to contain this inside of Wuhan, inside of Hubei province. But no, they acted like communists. They suppressed information. They visited people in the middle of the night who tried to blow the whistle on this virus, and now look where we are. All of Italy is an entire lockdown. Cases are rapidly expanding all around the world, to include here in the United States. And we are now largely dependent on China, having outsourced so much of our pharmaceutical manufacturing for basic pharmaceutical ingredients like Tylenol or Advil, that they feel empowered to threaten our people if we hurt their feelings, if we extend the travel ban. So we have to have the immediate response to the Wuhan coronavirus, but this is a moment of reckoning in which we will have a far-reaching reevaluation of our relationship with China.
This is such an important point to emphasize, that we are so dependent, particularly with our generic over-the-counter drugs, on China and their supply chain, which has been interrupted. It's going to continue to be interrupted. And as you touched on, we still don't have transparency. We'll never get transparency. We don't know if this is going to recur. We don't know what effect this is going to have year over year. And all of this is because China is the most closed media environment on the planet. And this is how communists behave. It's a totalitarian thing. And you're seeing its ripples globally now. Yet it still feels like, Senator, you're one of the few people in Washington who's talking about it in this way.
I can tell you that increasingly people are now awake to this threat. President Trump has done a very good job with, frankly, Republicans in Washington over the last 4 years to make them think a little bit less like corporate managers and a little bit more like American patriots first. We made a lot of wrong turns with China over the last 30 years. Now's the time to fix that, and it's time to fix it urgently. So if you are engaged, for instance, in manufacturing basic pharmaceutical ingredients in China, I suggest to you that you need to pack up and get out. And if you don't do it quickly, then the U.S. government may do it for you.
I'm with you on this, and I look forward to seeing what you guys can cook up in the Capitol. Let's talk about the president's remarks yesterday. Was there anything that stood out to you as important moments?
Well, I commend the president for making the difficult but probably necessary decision to shut down travel temporarily from Europe. We hate to do that with our allies, but again, because China was so deceitful from the very beginning, they allowed this virus to escape their own borders and get to places like Italy and now to most of the nations of Europe. Unfortunately, it was a step that was necessary. It was a step that the president was criticized for immediately by so-called public health experts, the very same people who criticized him in January for shutting down travel with China, which now everyone acknowledges bought us invaluable time to try to be better prepared for this virus. So I commend the president for that decision. Second, I think he's right to take the approach that we want to focus on those who are least able to adapt and change their daily life and their work because of this virus. And look, if you work at a computer or on a phone, you can do that kind of thing at home. If you've got daycare or especially if you've got nannies, that's fine. But if you're a waitress in Greenbrier, Arkansas,
yes,
and your kid goes to public school and it shuts down, you have to care for your child, and you've got to deal with the fact that your diner is probably falling off the cliff in terms of revenue. We have to focus our relief efforts on those people who are most hurt by the economic fallout of this virus. Hourly workers, manual laborers, people who are working hard all day long on their feet and with their hands. If you can telecommute, if you got a nanny, that's great. Not many Americans are in that situation, though.
Certainly. So what are the next steps that you anticipate? The president, I think, laid out some broader philosophical points, but what are the next steps that we can look for from the Congress?
Well, one thing I'm working on particularly is trying to get Deb Fischer's legislation that would provide many more masks for our healthcare professionals across the finish line this week. This bill should have passed last week as part of our supplemental bill. Senator Fischer has been working on it from the very beginning when we learned that we might face a mask shortage in this country as early as late April. Unfortunately, the Democrats objected. They put the request of ambulance-chasing trial lawyers to have jackpot justice lawsuits down the road ahead of the safety of our great doctors and nurses. I hope we can get that passed today, whether it's part of a bigger package, which would be harder to pass, or if the Democrats would simply just relent and let it pass by voice vote, because it would be unanimous or near unanimous if we did that. That's the most immediate thing on which I'm working, because we cannot, whatever happens, we cannot create more doctors and nurses. We can create more test kits. We can create more quarantine sites. We cannot create a new doctor and nurse. And if they don't have the mask they need to protect themselves as they're caring for our people, it will be a travesty, and it will be because Democrats put trial lawyers ahead of doctors.
So to your colleagues across the aisle on the Democratic side, I've seen a handful of people who do seem like they're trying to address this responsibly, but I see many more, I must admit, in perhaps this is a biased perspective as editor of Breitbart, but I do see more people who seem like they're not really urgent to solve. They're not as eager to solve this because they're spending a lot of time attacking the president and doing things on cable television in order to make the president's life more difficult. Am I just being too cynical here?
Well, unfortunately, the president's critics never miss an opportunity to criticize him, even for things that are obvious that should be done, like shutting down travel from China, or, unfortunately, to try to politicize matters. I mean, look at the New York Times calling this Wuhan coronavirus the Trump virus. That kind of thing is not helpful, shouldn't be done. We should all rally together as one people, as we have done in great challenges throughout our history, to rise above politics and together to rise above adversity. I hope that you're going to begin to see that from the Democrats today as the House moves forward on legislation. I hope they are working with our Republican friends in the House to get legislation that can pass in a large bipartisan basis to address this growing emergency, not something that simply tries to smuggle in all of their good ideas that they've never been able to get popular majorities for over the years.
Again, Senator Tom Cotton's my guest from Arkansas, and he's got a new ad out, which is really important. You can see this at Breitbart News, where you see he documents exactly Joe Biden's China ties, which are so extensive, and it's so relevant at this moment because the other major story is the 2020 election cycle where Joe Biden is pulling away from the Democrat field, and people seem like they don't want to make the connection that this does stem from Wuhan, China, and we still do not have full information from China. We'll never get full information from China. The senator's also got a great piece in National Review on this issue. Joe Biden is China's choice for president. If you had one takeaway, Senator, that you would want our audience to get from Joe Biden's history with China that for their water coolers today, what's the most important point they could make?
Joe Biden has been on China's side for 40 years, not on your side.
Senator, really appreciate the time. Come back whenever you like.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.